What happened to you?" Hell's Angel saw the bruise on Waitress's face. What he did next shocked. He noticed it before she even set the coffee down. A dark bloom beneath her eye, the way makeup tried and failed to hide it, the stiff carefulness in her shoulders like someone who had learned to shrink to survive. The diner lights buzzed, rain whispered against the windows, and the world felt suddenly smaller, colder, more dangerous. A man in a worn leather jacket, road dust in every crease, tattoos crawling up his arms, felt something inside him go absolutely still. He had seen bruises before. He had caused bruises before. But this one, on this quiet girl who moved like she didn't want to take up space, ripped open an old part of him he thought had gone numb. If you're watching this and believe that kindness, protection, and second chances still matter in a world that sometimes forgets them, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps more stories like this reach people who need to hear them. He watched her work the room, moving between tables with the mechanical politeness of someone who had learned how to survive by being pleasant. Her name tag was scratched, her hands carried the pale half-moons of healed cuts, and when she smiled, it never reached her eyes. He stirred his coffee and let the bitterness burn his tongue. On the surface, he was exactly what the other customers feared, a Hell's Angel, a man with scars, broken knuckles, and a past that clung to him like the smell of gasoline. But on the inside, he was someone who had learned, far too late, how much damage a man can do when he confuses power with love. Years back, he had sworn off the kind of rage that left bruises in its wake. He had promised himself that if he ever saw that story being written again, he wouldn't look away. The diner was almost empty by the time he noticed the way she flinched every time the bell over the door chimed. He noticed the faded truck that kept circling the parking lot. He noticed the way she checked the clock with dread instead of routine. He noticed everything because once, people had noticed him this way too and done nothing. He remembered a night when his own anger had nearly destroyed someone he cared about and the years of regret that followed like a punishment he could never finish serving. Now, as thunder rolled low and distant, he felt that same old regret harden into something quieter, steadier, resolve. The hours crawled. The waitress refilled cups, wiped tables, hid the tremor in her hands as best she could. He saw the bruise more clearly when she leaned toward the counter, the edges purple fading into yellow, the story of several days written across her skin. He imagined how it might have happened. The sharp words, the grabbing hand, the boom of a slammed door, the apology that wasn't really an apology at all. He imagined the way fear can build a cage around a person's life until they cannot remember what freedom feels like. He thought about the nights he had driven highways with no destination, pretending that movement was the same as escape. It wasn't. Escape requires courage, and courage requires someone believing you deserve more. He waited as the sky emptied itself outside, as the neon sign flickered, as the tired cook in the back turned off one grill at a time. Eventually, the diner went quiet in that way only late-night places do, where every sound is amplified, every breath feels loud. The truck finally stopped circling and pulled into a space near the back. The waitress noticed. Her spine stiffened. She swallowed and tried to smile, tried to steady herself, tried to turn invisible. In that moment, he understood there are wars fought without bullets, without uniforms, without the world ever clapping or saluting. They are fought by people like her, every single day, behind closed doors, in kitchens and bedrooms where hope feels like contraband. When her shift ended, the rain had softened to a mist that shimmered beneath the streetlights. She stepped outside into the damp night, clutching a worn purse to her chest, shoulders set like a person preparing for impact. The man by the truck leaned against the hood, the storm reflected in his eyes, and the air grew heavy with that terrible silence before something bad happens. The biker moved then, not with swagger, not with threat, but with a calm that felt like gravity. He did not raise his voice, he did not bare his teeth. He simply placed himself in the space where harm meant to travel, like a wall that refused to move. Years of roads, fights, mistakes, and scars had taught him this. Real strength is quiet. Real strength is choosing restraint when anger would be easier. He didn't lecture. He didn't intimidate. He simply let his presence say what words couldn't. A lifetime of reputation can sometimes be heavy, but it can also be repurposed into something protective. The man by the truck hesitated. Power has a way of shrinking in the face of someone who refuses to play its game. The tension thinned, broke, dissolved into the wet night. Nothing cinematic, nothing heroic, just a moment where violence changed its mind. And in that small, fragile victory, the world grew a fraction safer. The waitress stood there trembling, not with fear anymore, but with the shock of realizing someone had stepped between her and the part of her life that had felt inevitable. It wasn't over, of course. Life never resolves in a single neat scene. There were calls made, a sister who hadn't heard from her in months, a neighbor who had once said to reach out if anything ever went wrong, a shelter number written on a napkin that felt like a map to somewhere better, papers to sign, bags to pack, tears that were equal parts grief and relief. Through it all, the biker stayed just long enough to make sure her choices remained hers, to make sure no one tried to take the pen out of her hand as she rewrote her next chapter. He kept his distance, not out of indifference, but out of respect. He understood that help, when it becomes control, is just another cage. Days later, the diner looked the same. Same rain-streaked windows, same flickering neon, same chipped counter. But something had changed. The waitress wasn't there. Instead, a small card by the register mentioned new beginnings, courage, support resources. The biker sat at the same booth and let the coffee warm his hands. He thought about all the roads he had traveled, trying to outrun who he had been. He realized maybe redemption doesn't live in the past or the future. Maybe it lives in the choices we make in ordinary moments, in quiet parking lots, when nobody is filming, when nobody will ever clap. Maybe redemption is simply showing up as the person you wish you had been all along. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that even the smallest act of protection can ripple outward in powerful ways, please like the video, share it with someone who might need strength today, and subscribe so more hearts can find light in the dark. Before we end, I'd love for you to leave a comment telling what part of the story stayed with you the most, or if you've ever witnessed a moment of unexpected kindness. And as the biker rose to leave, slipping his helmet on and stepping back into the rain, the world looked no different to anyone else. Cars hissed past on wet asphalt. A train wailed in the distance. Life carried on, indifferent and sprawling. But somewhere, a woman was unpacking a small suitcase into a safe room, folding her clothes neatly like promises, discovering the unfamiliar weightlessness of a night without fear. Somewhere, a sister was making tea at a crowded kitchen table, listening, not judging, giving space to the story as it slowly unknotted itself. Somewhere, a number on a napkin had become the first rung of a ladder out of a pit she never asked to fall into. And somewhere, a man who had once believed that hardness was the only language the world respected now understood the quiet miracle of choosing gentleness. The road would keep stretching in front of him. The ghosts would never fully leave, but he had learned that the past is not a chain unless you let it be. It can also be a lesson, a compass pointing toward the people who need a shield more than they need a hero. Under the gray morning sky, the bike roared to life, not as an escape, but as a prayer whispered in steel and fuel in motion. Let me do less harm. Let me leave more light behind me than darkness. And in that simple prayer, in that ordinary morning, there was something beautiful, fragile, and worth believing in.